The Galactic Empire controlled thousands of star systems. Its military budget dwarfed entire planetary economies. Its star destroyers were the most visible symbols of absolute power the galaxy had ever produced. And yet, there were things living in this galaxy that didn't read Imperial decrees. Things that had never heard of the Emperor and wouldn't have cared if they had. Creatures that existed long before the Empire rose and would still be here long after it burned. Some of them were small enough to be dismissed. Some of them were large enough to swallow capital ships. All of them were completely indifferent to rank. The Empire's fatal flaw wasn't just arrogance toward its political enemies. It extended to the natural world itself, a systematic assumption that power meant dominion over everything, including things with scales and teeth and absolutely no interest in cooperating. Nature doesn't negotiate. It doesn't surrender. 7 times, the Empire discovered exactly what happens when you forget that. Number 7. The Wampa. Hoth is a death world. Average surface temperature of -60 degrees Celsius. Blizzards that reduce visibility to 0 in minutes. An ecosystem built almost entirely on things trying to kill other things. The Empire knew this. They surveyed the planet. They sent probe droids ahead of the occupation force. And then they sent stormtroopers anyway. What those stormtroopers shared the ice fields with was a Wampa, a bipedal, white-furred apex predator that grows to roughly 2.5 meters, blends perfectly with the terrain, and has the strength to incapacitate a full-grown Tauntaun as a casual act of hunting. Luke Skywalker found out personally. The creature had him hanging from the ceiling of an ice cave before he'd processed what hit him. He survived by using the Force to retrieve his lightsaber from the snow. Most prey doesn't have that option. The Imperial forces on Hoth deployed AT-AT walkers. They coordinated a full planetary assault with orbital support and ground-to-ground communications. At no point in the documented record does the Empire appear to have developed a single operational protocol for Wampa encounters. No threat assessment, no patrol adjustment, no acknowledgement that the planet's apex predator warranted any tactical consideration whatsoever. A world selected as a strategic search grid for rebel activity, and the local predator population didn't even register as a footnote in the operational planning. The rebels who occupied Echo Base before the Imperial assault were documented as having used Wampas as improvised defensive weapons, luring them into corridors to slow advancing enemy troops. That detail is from production materials and Legends-era sources, cut from the theatrical release of The Empire Strikes Back, but present in scripted and filmed versions. The scenes existed. The intent was documented. The people the Empire was hunting had figured out how to weaponize the local wildlife. The Empire, with all its resources and intelligence apparatus, apparently never considered the wildlife at all. A planet under Imperial occupation, with a confirmed apex predator freely operating across the same terrain as stationed personnel. No protocol. No response. Just stormtroopers sharing an ice world with something that could kill them in the dark without leaving a body. That's the entry point for what follows. Number 6. The Exogorth. Most dangerous creatures are at least visible. You can put a sensor on them. You can track movement patterns. You can, in theory, maintain distance. The Exogorth offers none of those options. These silicon-based organisms grow to thousands of meters in length. Some estimates place individual specimens at several kilometers. They live inside asteroids, in the vacuum of space, sustaining themselves on minerals, minox, and anything else that wanders into the hollow space they occupy, which looks, from the inside, exactly like a cave. A dark, irregularly shaped cave with a floor that moves, walls that breathe, and an atmosphere that smells wrong in a way you register half a second before you understand why. Han Solo discovered this in the Hoth asteroid field. The Millennium Falcon was sheltering in what appeared to be a promising tunnel. It was an Exogorth's digestive tract. The creature was large enough to swallow a light freighter without registering it as a meaningful meal. The Imperial TIE fighters pursuing the Falcon into that same asteroid field had no such warning before they went in. The Star Wars Visual Encyclopedia confirms that minox and organisms like them thrive in these environments. Exogorths are the apex of that entire asteroid-based food chain, the top of an ecosystem the Empire had never bothered to document. The Imperial failure here isn't a program that went wrong. There was no program. The Empire used asteroid fields as tactical pursuit zones, operational hazards to be managed, obstacles for an enemy to navigate while being hunted. The idea that the asteroids themselves might be alive, or home to something alive and enormous, apparently never warranted a doctrine. No catalog of known Exogorth territories in Imperial operational sectors, no warning systems, no evacuation protocol for vessels entering asteroid fields with confirmed megafauna activity. Containment of an Exogorth is fundamentally impossible. The creature lives in vacuum, inside solid rock, at arbitrary depth. You can't fence it. You can't threaten it with atmospheric weapons. You can't locate it until you're already inside its body. The Empire's entire military architecture was built around controlling space lanes, and the Exogorth doesn't use space lanes. It's the space lane, patient and dark and waiting for the next vessel that mistakes its throat for shelter. Some sources classify Exogorths not as animals, but as a silicon-based sentient species. The primary source record leaves this contested rather than confirmed. But if that classification holds, then the Empire wasn't just failing to manage dangerous wildlife. They were flying their ships into the mouths of beings that may have understood exactly what was happening. The Empire's institutional incapacity to recognize non-human intelligence was never going to handle that possibility. Number 5. The Fearox. Fort Anaxis wasn't an abandoned outpost. It was an active Imperial military installation built into an asteroid fragment, a former Republic base that the Empire had claimed, developed, and staffed during the early occupation era. Strategic real estate, defended position, and the Empire lost it. Fearox are silicon-based predators, built for the lightless interior of asteroid caves. They are aggressive toward any living presence in their territory, fast in complete darkness, and they breed in colonies large enough to overwhelm a military installation's defensive capacity. Their defining vulnerability is sunlight, or any sufficiently intense light source. In open daylight, they retreat. Inside an asteroid, there is no daylight. The Fort Anaxis asteroid fragment was their natural habitat in every sense that mattered, and trained Imperial soldiers with Imperial-grade weapons couldn't hold the installation against them. The Empire ceded a military facility to creatures that couldn't survive direct exposure to a star. This is a verified case, confirmed in canon, of Imperial military infrastructure being defeated by local fauna. The distinction matters. Not a tactical withdrawal with strategic justification. Not a resource allocation decision. A staffed, operational, equipped base abandoned because the local predator population made it indefensible, and Imperial command apparently had no answer to that problem. The rebel crew of the Ghost encountered the same Fearox colony when they later scouted the base. They barely escaped. The difference is instructive. The rebels went in expecting a fight, improvised a solution using the base's residual power systems to generate a burst of light, and got out. The Empire had been there long enough to staff the place, and still didn't develop that answer. Fort Anaxis sat in Imperial operational space, and at no point did anyone with sufficient authority decide that retaking a military installation from creatures with a documented light sensitivity was worth the institutional effort. 3 entries in, the pattern is already set. Hoth. No protocol for the apex predator sharing the planet. Asteroid fields. No doctrine for megafauna disguised as geography. Fort Anaxis. No solution for a predator colony on an active military base, despite that colony having a known, exploitable weakness. The Empire didn't just fail to control the galaxy's dangerous creatures, it repeatedly failed to register that the problem existed until it was already losing. Number 4. The Crate Dragon. Tatooine was Imperial territory. The Empire maintained a garrison there. Stormtroopers patrolled Mos Eisley. There were checkpoints, informant networks, bounty hunter contracts, and the whole apparatus of occupation running across the planet's inhabited settlements. Administrative control, documented and functional, at least by the Empire's accounting. The greater krayt dragon had no idea. It grew to over 100 meters in length. 10 legs supported its bulk across the desert floor. Its hide was thick enough to shrug off conventional weapons at standard ranges, and it moved through the dunes with the patience of something that had never needed to hurry. Inside its gizzard, it formed crystalline pearls, beautiful, valuable, and accessible only by killing one of the most dangerous organisms in the known galaxy, which is why they commanded the prices they did, and why the people doing the killing were either extremely skilled or extremely desperate. In the era following the Empire's collapse, it took a Mandalorian warrior in Beskar armor, a coordinated assault from a full village of Tusken raiders, and an explosive charge detonated from inside the creature's own body to kill a single specimen. The creature survived multiple direct rocket strikes. It survived concentrated blaster fire from trained fighters moving in formation. The kill required a creative method developed through genuine tactical thinking and a combined force acting in careful coordination, and the outcome still wasn't certain until it was over. During the height of Imperial control on Tatooine, there is no record of any Imperial program engaging with this problem. No pearl harvesting operation, despite the pearls being documented as high-value trade commodities that anyone with a garrison and an extraction team could theoretically profit from. No territorial mapping of krayt dragon ranges to protect civilian settlements or garrison personnel from 100-meter predators. No guidance for stationed stormtroopers on what threat response looked like when the apex predator of a planet they occupied decided to move toward a populated area. The Tusken Raiders, a people Imperial-aligned forces routinely oppressed, dismissed, and in documented cases massacred, had spent generations building detailed, ritualized knowledge of krayt dragon behavior. They knew the approach angles. They knew the feeding patterns. They had cultural memory stretching back centuries on how to survive in proximity to this creature, how to hunt it when necessary, how to respect it when hunting wasn't the goal. The Empire, with its survey drones and Imperial academies and thousands of hours of doctrine documentation, knew less about the planet's most dangerous animal than the people it considered beneath notice. That isn't purely a tactical failure, it's a structural one, built into the Empire's foundations. An institution that dismissed the knowledge held by the beings it oppressed was never going to learn from them. The Tusken Raiders held the operational intelligence the Empire needed to safely administer Tatooine, and Imperial doctrine had no mechanism for receiving it. That incapacity wasn't incidental. It was policy, and on a planet with a 100-meter apex predator, policy had consequences. Number 3. The Sarlac. The Great Pit of Carcoon doesn't look dangerous from a distance. A depression in the sand. A circular arrangement of teeth at the end of something very patient and very old. What the Sarlac does, once it has you, is digest you over 1,000 years. That figure comes directly from Return of the Jedi, C-3PO translating Jabba's execution sentence, informing Han Solo and the others condemned alongside him that they would be slowly digested over 1,000 years. A millennium of dissolution, the creature sustaining its prey in a state somewhere between life and death throughout the process. Legends material describes the Sarlac as preserving victim consciousness during digestion, aware, unable to act, processing everything around it. That specific detail hasn't been reconfirmed in Disney canon, so treat it as unverified in the current timeline. But the base biology, immobile, ancient, lethal on a time frame that outlasts civilizations, is fully established and confirmed. The Sarlac at Carcoon sat in a system with Imperial presence throughout the Galactic Civil War. Jabba used it as an execution tool for his own purposes, a private contractor's deployment of an environmental hazard that cost him nothing and impressed everyone. There is no record of the Empire attempting to study it, weaponize it, relocate it, or incorporate it into any organized program. No feasibility study, no survey mission, no interest at all, apparently, in a creature that could hold prisoners for 1,000 years without a cell, a guard, or a power source. That absence is the story. The Empire's model of power runs on speed, projection, and rapid, overwhelming force. Destroy fast, pacify immediately, move to the next system. The Sarlac operates on a completely different axis. It doesn't move. It doesn't pursue. It doesn't broadcast. It simply waits for something to fall within range, and then it waits 1,000 more years after that. There is no Imperial doctrine for that category of threat, because Imperial doctrine can't conceive of that timescale as a relevant variable. The Galactic Republic rose and fell. The Clone Wars burned across the galaxy for years. The Empire consolidated power, extended its reach across thousands of star systems, committed atrocities on a civilizational scale, and collapsed at Endor. And the Sarlac was still in its pit, patient as geology, completely indifferent to every political structure that had come and gone above the sand. Boba Fett survived it, confirmed in both Legends and Disney canon, though the method differs between the two. The creature that couldn't be used, studied, or exploited across decades of galactic upheaval just kept existing. On a planet the Empire occupied, under their administrative authority, answerable to absolutely nobody. Number 2. The Zillow Beast. Everything above this entry represents passive failure. The Empire not noticing, not accounting for, not adapting. At number 2, the failure becomes deliberate, active, funded, top priority weaponization. Direct personal involvement from the Emperor himself, years of investment, and still failure. The story starts in the Clone Wars era, roughly 22 to 19 years before the Battle of Yavin. A Republic military campaign on Malastare deploys an electro-proton bomb against separatist droid forces. The detonation works. It also wakes something up underground. A Zillow Beast, the last known member of its species, a kaiju-class creature with scales that resist conventional weapons, plasma, and thermal charges. Academic analysis has directly compared it to Godzilla. The comparison isn't a stretch. Mace Windu and Anakin Skywalker are both involved in the containment operation. Skywalker reportedly resisted the order to destroy the creature, noting its apparent intelligence and endangered status. He was overruled. Palpatine ordered the Zillow Beast transported alive to Coruscant for study, and the scale of that undertaking alone, moving a near-indestructible kaiju across the galaxy in restraints, reflects how personally invested Palpatine was in what those scales could offer. Not standard military interest, personal interest. Emperor-level prioritization of a single organism. On Coruscant, the creature escaped. It rampaged through the capital city. Once free, it appeared to specifically seek out Palpatine, not the clone troopers, not the civilian population, not any random target of opportunity, the man who had ordered its capture. Published analysis of the Clone Wars series is explicit on this. Once the Zillow Beast escaped, it moved directly toward Palpatine to destroy him. It recognized the specific source of the threat to its existence and pursued it with apparent intent. It was killed with concentrated poison gas before it could close the distance. Palpatine immediately ordered tissue samples and remains collected from the body. Years later, under the Empire, those samples went to work. In the Bad Batch, confirmed Disney canon, the Empire successfully cloned a Zillow Beast using DNA sequenced from the Coruscant specimen. The program ran through Imperial research infrastructure, including facilities connected to Mount Tantus on Wayland. Palpatine's interest had carried forward from Republic to Empire without interruption. Years of scientific work, enormous resource expenditure, the full institutional weight of Imperial research directed at one objective: replicating the creature's power, potentially weaponizing the animal itself. The cloned Zillow Beast became uncontrollable. The Bad Batch documented the incident at Scylla, the creature loose and unmanageable, the program that started with the Emperor's direct order ending in exactly the same chaos as the original. The effort that survived the transition from Republic to Empire, that consumed years and vast resources, it ended with a cloned apex predator that nobody could contain. That's the full arc. Palpatine ordered the original killed, then spent years trying to resurrect it, then spent more resources trying to harness the clone, the creature that he'd personally marked for exploitation, transported across the galaxy, killed, dissected, and reconstituted from preserved DNA. it gave the same answer every single time. Whether the scales are specifically lightsaber resistant remains a contested claim in canon. The confirmed resistance applies to conventional weapons, plasma, and thermal charges, while the specific lightsaber claim comes from inferred durability rather than confirmed on-screen dialogue. What is confirmed is that the Empire's most elaborate, most personally sanctioned creature program produced a clone that no one could manage. The man who believed he could dominate everything in the galaxy funded a project whose endpoint was a creature actively hunting its own creators. Number 1. The Purgill. Every entry above this represents the Empire failing to control something it encountered. This entry is the Empire being removed from the board entirely by something it had already dismissed and forgotten. Purgills are hyperspace whales, enormous creatures that travel through deep space in pods, navigating hyperspace lanes by feeding on naturally occurring Cluzon-36 gas, which enables them to initiate jumps. Republic-era spacers knew them as navigational nuisances, massive animals that occasionally interfered with shipping lanes. Imperial documentation treated them the same way, obstacles to route around, wildlife worth noting on a navigational chart and nowhere else. No Imperial tactical doctrine, anywhere in the documented record, classified Purgills as a weapons delivery system. No contingency existed for a force-sensitive being directing a pod of hyperspace whales against a fleet. The gap between what Purgills were and what they could do, that specific, enormous blind spot in Imperial military thinking, cost the Empire its most capable commander, Grand Admiral Thrawn, the Empire's strategic genius. An officer who had built his reputation by never losing a significant engagement through conventional military means, by studying his enemy's art and culture as tactical intelligence, by adapting while other Imperial officers applied overwhelming force and called it strategy. Above Lothal, approximately 1 year before the Battle of Yavin, Thrawn had the Ghost crew and the entire Lothal rebel cell cornered. His fleet was positioned. Victory was a procedural matter. Ezra Bridger used a force connection to direct a pod of Purgills against Thrawn's command ship. The creatures latched on and dragged the vessel, Thrawn, his crew, elements of the surrounding fleet, into hyperspace. Destination unknown. The Empire's greatest military mind was gone, removed from the field entirely, transported by spacefaring megafauna to coordinates no Imperial officer would locate during the Galactic Civil War. Thrawn hadn't been beaten by a superior commander. A force-sensitive teenager had learned to communicate with Purgills through a channel the Empire had no concept of and no countermeasure for. And the result was that the most dangerous Imperial officer of his generation simply ceased to be a factor in the war. His fleet, his genius, his decades of strategic development, all of it pulled into the dark by creatures that Republic-era spacers had logged as a nuisance. Thrawn had observed Purgills operating in the hyperspace lanes near Lothal and cataloged them as navigational obstacles. Nothing more. He never considered that his enemy might be able to speak to them. That failure of imagination, from the most imaginative officer the Empire ever produced, is the definitive statement about what Imperial institutional culture did to the people inside it. It trained them to see power and control as the only variables worth accounting for. Anything outside that framework was noise. The Purgills weren't recruited. They didn't understand what the Empire was. A force-sensitive boy spoke to them in a language the Empire had no concept of, and the result was that Thrawn, the man who had outmaneuvered every opponent the galaxy threw at him, was swallowed by the void alongside creatures that didn't know his name. Every creature on this list is still out there. Wampas still hunt the Hoth ice plains in blizzard conditions, invisible until they're already on top of you. Exogorths still wait in the dark interiors of asteroid fields, indistinguishable from tunnels until something flies in and doesn't come back. Fearox still nest in the lightless caverns of asteroid bases the Empire couldn't hold. A crate dragon still moves across Tatooine's desert, operating on territory the Empire once claimed without ever understanding. The Sarlac sits in the Dune Sea, precisely as patient as it has been for the length of recorded galactic history. Purgills still swim through hyperspace lanes that Imperial survey crews once marked as navigational nuisances and never reconsidered. And the Zillow program, If the Bad Batch documents anything accurately, left behind a legacy that didn't disappear when the Empire did. The Galactic Empire spent extraordinary resources trying to dominate the natural world the same way it dominated political systems, through force, hierarchy, and the unexamined assumption that power meant ownership of everything it could see. Rebellions took 2 decades to bring the Empire down through organized military resistance. The galaxy's creatures never needed anywhere near that long. They just kept being exactly what they were: ancient, indifferent, and entirely beyond the reach of any Imperial decree. The Empire is gone. The creatures remain. Subscribe for more stories from the galaxy's corners the history books forget to mention.